Welcome back. Today's lesson is proportional relationships. It's lesson 8 and page 9. And now we're going to start talking about proportionality and graphs. So you can see a table, which is blank. We're going to be able to fill that in. As mentioned in the previous lesson, we're going to make some ordered pairs from that table. And then we're going to be able to make a graph. So it starts out asking us to use the information below to create a table and determine the constant of proportionality, which we also call K. And here's the information they gave us. A biker rides 18 miles in 1 hour. And if we look, we see hours, that must be our X value, and miles is our Y value. So let's start filling this in. So based on what they gave us, they mentioned 1 hour and can ride a bike for 18 miles in 1 hour. So up at the top, they mentioned that they want us to find the constant of proportionality and the K value, and all they've given us so far is just this little bit of information right here. And from that, we now have an X value and a Y value. So is that enough to determine the constant of proportionality or the K value? Well, if we recall, here's how we do it. We take the Y value, and I'm going to write it off to the side, and divide it by the X value. And we have one of those. We're going to put 18 divided by 1, and that would give us 18. So that's all the information they've given us. But we do know that the K value, or constant proportionality, is 18. Now you're going to notice they didn't give us any other information, but we do have enough to actually build this table. And we'll just try to keep the hours simple. How about we just use consecutive numbers? That means numbers in order. And so we started with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, we do know that the constant of proportionality is 18. So that also means that we can use this equation. We can use y equals 18, where the K would be x, or if you prefer to use it this way, 18x equals y. And since our table is written with the x first and the y, we'll go ahead and use it this way. So we're going to start by taking our 18 and multiply it times each one of our x values. So 18 times 2 would give us 36. 18 times 3, should be a parentheses, would give us 54. 18 times 4 would give us 72, and I'm going to have you pause this video and continue to find the rest of the values. Take a moment to double check your values and then make corrections if needed. So next, they're going to ask us to write ordered pairs. An ordered pair is written with an X value and a Y value. And we use those ordered pairs, or else sometimes called coordinates, to make 1 point on the graph. So even though we see two numbers, they both make up 1 point. In fact, we have to I always call it marry them by putting them together with parentheses. If you don't use the parentheses, that would not be considered an ordered pair. So let me go ahead and clean this up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and erase some of this, I hope. So now we're going to start taking each X value in each row. I see 1 is paired up with 18, and we're going to marry them with parentheses to make sure we know that's a point. 2 is paired up with 36. 3 is paired up with 54, and you can pause this and finish the rest of this on your own. When we graph a point or an ordered pair, we need to make a horizontal movement. And so a horizontal movement would look like this. And we may need to make a vertical movement. which would look like this. So I've labeled this vertical line using Y, and I've labeled this horizontal line using X. And they had it written there, but it was kind of small, a little bit difficult to see. I'm going to go ahead once more, kind of erase this if I can. I don't know why my eraser doesn't want to help me out. Well, I guess I'm going to leave it there. We're going to label now what everything means, all these grid marks mean, because it's talking about the x-axis right here, this X. All of these lines mean something, and what they mean is the number of hours. And so if I look at my hours over here, I can see that this would have to be 0 hours, but if I move, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll just continue giving each grid mark a number. So we can write up to 10 hours on this bottom axis. Now we're going to go to the y-axis, and that's talking about the total number of miles. So we're going to write that. We're going to tell our reader that this vertical line is talking about the number of miles. And you may have noticed that each of these numbers, they don't go up consecutively. However, there is a pattern. We're actually adding 18 each time we move. So if we have a consistent scale, they're going up by 18. We can also use that on our graph. So each one of these grid marks would represent an increment of 18. So we would start at 0, and this first line would be 18 miles. The next line would be 36 miles, 54 miles, etc., just like our table looks. Now this is all we have on our table, so when we get to 126, we're going to add another 18, which would bring us to 144. Again, we're going to add another 18. That'd be 162, and another 18 would bring us to 180. So now we're going to graph those ordered pairs, and we start at 0, 0, and I'm going to go to the right 1 and then up to 18, and we're going to make a point. Those two numbers make 1 point. We always start back at the origin. We're going to go right 2 and up to 36. And in case you're not sure where I'm getting those numbers to be clear, I'm using each one of these ordered pairs. So the next ordered pair is 3, 54. So we start and we move right on the x-axis because it's an x number and go up to 54, and that up movement is a y movement. So would you pause the video and complete the rest of the points that we have on our table? You're going to notice that our table stops at 7, and it's actually okay for us to stop at 7 as well. But what we now have is points that if we connect them, it made a straight line. And so even though we don't have points, we can actually continue this straight line because we now see a pattern, and we always want to put an arrow showing that we realize that this x-axis and y-axis go continually, and so will this line. So now let's see, based on what we've done, we're talking about graphs and proportionality in graphs. They're going to give us a couple examples to look at. So it says, compare the two graphs below. Jot down your observations in the table, in this chart or this table below. So you're going to notice this word proportional. They're telling us that these two graphs are proportional. They're also saying non-proportional, which means they're not proportional. And these two graphs they're stating are not proportional. So let's see what the two proportional graphs have in common. Well, hopefully you've noticed that they're both straight lines. So we're going to put their straight lines. And there's a word for that in math, and we refer to it as linear. And it looks like a line R. It actually has the word line in it, but we say linear. And then this is not quite as obvious, but both of them pass through the center of the graph, just like our graph did up above. And that's known as the origin. They pass through, the lines pass through 0.00, and that's known as the origin. In fact, when we're graphing, we would go back to the origin and count whatever number they gave us. For instance, we started at the origin and went 7 to the right, and then we went up from that point to 126. So the characteristics of a proportional graph are that it has to be a straight line, and it must pass through or start at that origin. So now let's look at these two graphs. This one, oh, well, this one's a straight line. I wonder what's different about this one compared to these two. Do you see something different? I see that it's a straight line. Well, hopefully you noticed that this particular graph is a straight line, but it does not pass through the origin. So let's write that down. Does not pass through the origin. And we'll name that point, just so you're sure, as 0, 0. That's what the origin of the ordered pair that we're looking for. And now if I look at this graph, that's not a straight line at all. So in this case, it looks like that this means that it's not a straight line. So once again, since we're all about proportionality in this unit, when we have a proportional relationship in tables, we're looking for these two things: straight lines, and they must pass or start at the origin. See you next lesson.